What's going on, Tamers? It's me, guy who stood in line at 7 a.m. in sideways rain for the EX7 Digimon Liberator set. After looking at those cards, if that's not dedication, I don't know what is. And yes, that means we do have a brand new set of cards to explore and play and mess around with. But before we do that, as per usual, I want to take one last look at the previous set's meta as a whole before moving forward. BT17 was a set that gave you the best of both worlds. It gave you a bunch of brand new decks to try out, lots of new cards, lots of new ways to play the game in general, as well as a bunch of cards to support older decks that had fallen out of use and potentially buff them up to current standards again. And while I think that at the start of this set, many people had their eyes on Imperial Digimon as well as Magnamon X Antibody as two decks that would pretty much rule the game during this set. And while that ultimately did happen, I will say that we got a bunch of surprises along the way and some unexpected newcomers to join the fray. That being said, let's take a look at some of the top decks, a couple of key takeaways, and one last look at how each deck performed in this set. If you've ever seen these meta retrospective videos in the past, then you know that something that I like to do is to split the set into major time periods. And luckily there wasn't a whole lot going on in BT17, which means that we just basically have the full set's lifespan as a time period, ranging from the end of March until the end of May. Of course, in the middle of April we did get the Digimon Liberator starter decks released, but the cards in those decks were not big enough to really shake up the meta, and so they didn't really have much of an effect. With that said, that means we can just hop right into the top performing decks from this set as a whole. The top 10 decks you see on your screen here include things like Blue-Green Imperial Digimon, who got the new Return to Ancestors option card, which is a fantastic way to prevent them from being removed from the board. Things like Ancient Garurumon was a deck that I don't think anybody really had on their radar until after the set's release, where it really picked up a lot of steam on week 2 going forward. Things like Numemon remain strong here alongside things like Magnamon Armor. Keep in mind, this Magnamon Armor you see here is the blue version of the deck, focusing on VMon cards, not the yellow Vaccine Armor style of the deck. We also got Fenrir Lugumon, who got the new Take Mikazuchi support and secret rare cards, which allowed them a not consistent but a very powerful turn or potentially turn 2 OTK, alongside the Dorogoromon deck here, which received the new Dex cards in the BT17 set. This is personally my favorite deck to play with, and I did an entire deck profile on this one. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend you check it out because you get to see my entire building strategy from week 1 all the way up to the most current week. And then finally at number 7 we've got Vaccine Armor, the yellow version of Magnamon, which also includes cards like Rapidmon, alongside things like Mirage Galgamon, Ancient Greymon, the other side of the coin to Ancient Garurumon. Once people really figured out how Ancient Garurumon worked, they just kind of like ported it over to Ancient Greymon and just worked just as well. And then rounding out the list, we have a tie between 7 Great Demon Lords, a holdover from the EX6 set, which released just before BT17, as well as Shine Greymon, which received some new toys to play with in this set as well. Some of the biggest takeaways from this set, some things that you should probably keep in mind if you're playing this, is that number 1, speed really is king. Where in the previous set, BT16, I said that you want to make sure that you have a big Digimon because in that set, might made right. Now, just being a big Digimon is not enough, you have to do it quickly. Within like 3 to 4 turns, you need to be able to set up your deck, and if you don't, you typically just get steamrolled by your opponent who did set up. This takeaway was brought on mainly by blue decks, which saw a huge increase in speed. Things like Ancient Garurumon, which can start eating away to security within 1 to 2 turns, and then things like Gabumon Rush, who can loop their Digimon over the course of a single turn, take out multiple security that way. Because many of these decks focused on playing Digimon from the raising area every single turn, one of the ways that you could slow them down was using the Digimon Emperor. In fact, it was the main way that you wanted to slow a lot of these decks down. And so as a result, he kind of became the tech cards for decks, where if you weren't running like a super aggro deck, you probably put in a copy of 2 of him just to make sure that if you run into them, you have an answer. Another big takeaway from BT17 is that you needed a way to scale the wall that was Magnamon X Antibody. In fact, it felt like he became a keystone in the game where if you could not find a way to overcome him, you weren't really that competitive. And even though Magnamon X Antibody could become unaffected by effects and could potentially become a 15 or 18,000 DP Digimon, there were still decks that found ways around this. You have things like the Imperial Digimon deck that could swing over him using some of their DP pluses. You could use things like Numemon to either swarm him and just go super wide, or use Venusmon to shut his effects off, or Ancient Garurumon who could just ignore him because the BT17 Koji Tamer did not allow your Digimon to be blocked. And so an important thing I want you to keep in mind is that when you're building decks for BT17, make sure that you have an answer to this guy, because if you don't, he's going to become a problem. And the final big point that I want to touch on for BT17 is Ukomon. In BT16, Ukomon seemed like a really problematic card because he could slot into virtually every single deck. He allowed you to move Digimon from the raising area to the battle area every single turn, and he could search a nondescript Digimon or Tamer from your top 3 cards of your deck every single time that happened. However, I can say that in BT17, his drawbacks did become a bit more apparent, and that is Ukamon can't evolve, and so it's great that he can help you search through the deck for the cards that you need, but if you're trying to get level 3 up very quickly and then evolve up the line, Ukamon doesn't allow you to do that, and I think this is one of the reasons why in Vaccine Yellow, you saw people starting to cut Ukamons for other cards like, Kudamon, or Cutemons, or Pillowmons as a way for them to, if they don't find a Patamon, Digivolve up from a Yellow Digimon level 3 into a Rapidmon. And so as a result of Ukamon not being able to actually evolve, you saw he was cut in a lot of decks. I want to preface this by saying that Ukamon is still a very strong and very flexible card. You see him still included in some of the best decks in the game because they don't have to operate at the level 3s, which means they can fill those slots up with Ukamon and help them more quickly search through the deck for the cards that they do need. Which means if you're like me, you can finally rejoice that you don't need 16 copies of this card anymore, thank God. Something I wanted to start trying out is to give a couple of quick notes or interesting tidbits about some of the more popular decks in this set. Starting with the Imperial Dramon deck that got tons of support in the last 2 sets as a whole. This deck really felt like the true protagonist. He could do everything you needed to do. You could scale a Magnemon X Antibody getting over 15,000 DP, you could rest and freeze Digimon so they couldn't block you can Source Strip them to get rid of really annoying effects, and you could do that to get around things like Tyrant's effect, where the Tamer Source Strips and not the actual Digimon, so you could actually Source Strip from Tyrant and stop some of his really annoying effects. You had really excellent ace choices in the fighter mode ace as well as the paladin mode ace. And finally, he had removal protection from things like Return to the Ancestors, which honestly is still a card I'm very surprised that got printed. Additionally, Ancient Garurumon was the deck that really surprised a lot of people and I didn't think anybody saw coming. It honestly was the biggest surprise of this set, and that's because it could bypass blocker using the BT17 Koji Tamer, who just essentially says, hey, don't block this card. And then finally, the power of the Ancient Garurumon, which just lets you bounce security cards to your opponent's hand, in addition to the safety that the hybrid style decks provide and being able to digivolve from Tamers, forced a lot of decks in the game to speed up or just die. Some other notes include things like Fenrir Lugamon, which I think going into the set, people found a turn 2 OTK with the deck, which was kind of bonkers, but unfortunately it wasn't that likely to happen in an actual match, and so while this deck had a really strong start in the beginning of this set's lifespan, it kind of tapered off toward the end. I will say this though, it is still a very strong deck. A turn 2 OTK is still a turn 2 OTK, and if it happens on turn 3 or turn 4, that's still really good by all metrics. There was also Tyrant Kabuterimon, which I think after a few weeks of just radio silence, just kind of emerged back on the scene. It seems that with the emergence of Ancient Garurumon, he just kind of sprang back to life, where just having big DP and the power to redirect instead of blocking was really strong. I will mention though that the one big check to him is Heaven's Judgment, the yellow option card, and still remains that to this day, so yellow decks, including things like Ancient Garurumon, which can run yellow cards, still have an answer to him. And then some final notes here, I want to talk about things like Omnimon, which coming into the set seemed like a very interesting deck as a whole. It had a super telegraph but incredibly powerful counter effect that if you could not stop it from happening, you just lost the game. And while this deck showed a lot of promise really early on in the set's lifespan, as players learn how to actually play around the Omnimon, to force him down and then destroy him, the deck saw a huge drop off in popularity, unfortunately. And then finally, Gabumon Rush. This is another deck that I don't think a lot of people were really prepared for or expected to see at all. It brought back the BT6 Mat and Tide Tamers to the forefront, realizing that their effects to give you +1 memory and +1 card draw whenever you move a Gabumon from the raising area to the battle area is not a once per turn effect, which means you can utilize the power of those Tamers as well as things like Ancient Greymon or Ancient Garurumon to loop cards from the raising area to the battle area multiple times in a single turn. And so yes, while it is a very aggressive deck, that's also one of the drawbacks. Any way that you can stop them from drawing cards, or if they get a bad hand, or cards like Digimon Emperor, which force them to lose memory every single time they want to go from the raising area to the battle area, is a huge burden to them. And so to round this video out, I want to take one last look at the final results chart for this entire BT17 set. You see things here like the top 10 that I mentioned before. Keep in mind that this is Magnemon Armor, the blue version, and right below that is the Vaccine Armor, the yellow version of the deck. As we drop into the rookie level, a couple of notes here. This is Gabumon Rush that you see right here, and then if you drop down to the next line here, it's still in the same column, you've also got Agumon Rush, a deck that I kind of showed off in a previous video, I think maybe last week, as of the recording of this. We've also got things like this right here, which is not a Gallantmon deck. Gallantmon is actually over here. This is a mill deck, so this could be like Millith, using just like Lilithmon, as well as some of the Growlmon cards to mill cards off the top of your deck or other things. Keep in mind, this is also Lucemon Control, which you see here. It's a deck that uses Lucemon to play the other 7 Great Demon Lords, but is not the 7 Great Demon Lords deck itself, which is right up here. And then looking down at the in-training level here, we've got things like Apocalypse, which is essentially just Omnimon Control. So it uses the black version like Omnimon Zwart, the Zwart Defeat, and like the Merciful mode here as well. And things like that alongside the, this right here is Security Control, the little lock with the security icon that you see. And also Leopardmon. So there was actually a lot of decks that use Leopardmon to just play other big green Digimon, but as long as they had like a substantial number of Leopardmon in the deck, I just made them a Leopardmon deck. So that's, if you have like a Leopardmon with Zephagamon or something like that, then it's just Leopardmon. And so that's pretty much the BT17 set in a nutshell. Lots of really fun decks to play in this set. We've got a lot of really new interesting cards and some really surprising new decks kind of popped up out of nowhere and kind of took over the game. I had a ton of fun playing in this set. I hope you folks did as well. And if you're playing in the English version of the game, I hope that you guys are looking forward to the set when it drops over there. And so with that said, what are your thoughts on this set? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, if you folks have any questions about things I didn't cover in this video, feel free to put them down there as well. I'll do my best to answer them as soon as I can. Anyways, folks, I'm going to get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.